wow. It's, I can't adjust the image, really? Okay, whatever. I hope it looks okay. Usually I can do a thing and make it look better, but it's not working. So, whatever. I hope it sounds alright. Oh wow, Stream Elements bot is still running. I'm using webcam mode rather than OBS, so it's not going to do any fun graphics or anything when people subscribe or whatever. Yeah, I'm still alive. And my voice sounds okay. My mouth hurts because apart from COVID, I also got my mouth ulcer thing flaring up. Now, it would have been more than 5 years ago, and it happened twice. I had a flaring up of, just like nuclear level mouth ulcers, and yeah, like those got really bad, sort of all inside my mouth, and I was struggling to like eat or drink, and both times I got told, like, if I didn't start being able to eat or drink with steroids and so on, painkillers, Sepicaine, that mouthwash stuff, if I didn't get that sorted, I'd have to go to hospital. So yeah, and so I've had some on this side, and that's how I know it's not a real sore throat, because it's just this side, all the mouth ulcers have flared up, and yeah. So that's the thing. It makes it a little bit hard to talk, so I don't know how long I'll go for. Also with the actual COVID stuff, I can feel that my breathing is not quite right. Like, I don't feel out of breath. Is this a bit much with me not being able to adjust the picture? Whoa, that is too much the other way. And now have I blown it out completely? Oh, I should have just done the OBS thing, hey. With the COVID stuff, yeah, I feel my breathing's still not quite right. I'm still coughing up a bit of stuff. I've had sniffles, but that seems to be controlled with, my antihistamines. Just sort of gone a bit more hardcore with it. Today I've been a bit dizzy. My ear has gotten clogged. And that affects all the balance and stuff. And so, yeah, like, it's not really a room spinning dizziness. It was just like going from lying down to sitting up, but not in that way of blood pressure. Sorry, there's things everywhere. Not in the blood pressure sort of way. Yeah, anyway, so it's been a pretty miserable time. I thought I would come online and do a, hey, I'm still alive kind of thing, but, I'll just live stream, because then I don't have to worry about editing anything, uploading anything. Does mean that I only kind of have one shot to get things right, but hey, no, you don't mind rambling. Yeah, wow, it's weird to see it actually in mirror image, because OBS doesn't mirror image. I don't know if it's actually going out live as a mirror image though, or if YouTube flips it. That's a bit, I don't know, I'm just so not, I've become used to not seeing myself mirror imaged. Yeah, and so it's kind of weird, like, now looking at my room going, yeah, that's a mirror image of my room. Whoa, it's tripping me out a bit. Yeah, I've had a pretty miserable time. It's been a week since my positive rat. And I know I did that short where I seemed kind of chirpy, but yeah, I had to spend a lot of time in bed. I think what happened first is I was having more of the headaches and fever kinds of stuff. I hope this is loud enough. Is it loud enough? So I'm just going to tap it. I don't even know if it's loud enough. I think it... How do I even see which microphone it's using? I hope it's working properly. It's not telling me. Yeah, that's another reason I should have used OBS, so that if there's a problem, it's easier for me to reset things. Yeah, anyway, so what was I talking about? I've already lost my train of thought. No, I started off with, like, mostly headaches, and I think I did have a bit of a fever definitely by the second day. Um, Headaches, feeling just generally gross, and then the mouth ulcer thing kicked up at some point. Um, I didn't really get coughs until about halfway through. It was more just, like, the fatigue and, um yeah, no, the fevers, I had, like, the whole, like, wet cloth on my head. Some of you would have seen that on Instagram because I did get bored one day and do a bunch of stories. Are they called? Yeah, stories. Um, and yeah, so I sort of was on the whole, like, all the antihistamines, your Panadol and Nurofen, kept that up. I was doing throat gargles. Now, I know the throat gargle thing says this is only for bacterial stuff, but there is some evidence that says it can kill viruses. So if there were viruses, like, lingering in the back of my throat, that's what I hope to kill there. And, like, these mouth ulcers, I don't think are COVID related. I think they're an ongoing thing. So if I can kill the viruses there, I think they're stress though. And okay, never mind COVID symptoms, boring. Um, I think actually I was carrying COVID for a few days before, like, it actually hit me and I tested positive. Because in the lead up, I did notice some weird things about my hay fever. Um, yeah, and like, because like, I'm always sniffling. That's one of the hardest things about the pandemic. And people sort of being like, "Oh, it's just sick." I guess it's good if people stay away, but they stay away anyway because I look like a nutcase. Because I am a nutcase, so why not own it? Um, but yeah, like, I'd blow my nose and there was a little bit of blood in there for a few days. Just chuck it out. I was feeling fine though. And see, I think like, I've had my 5 vaccinations. Mum's been at us to do all that. Did something just flicker on the screen? It freaks me out. Um, and I had my most recent vaccination, like, within the last 2 months, I think, and I had the bivalent. That's my first bivalent, though, because I had all the other vaccines, like, as soon as I could get them. And so, yeah, the 4th one, bivalent, hadn't come out yet. So, like, sometimes there is good things about waiting because you get the most up-to-date shit. Um, anyway, no, so I had the vaccine, like, within enough time frame that I should have been covered now. Now, I know they're not perfect, but I think what really kicked things off, was stress, because stress does affect your immune system. That's pretty well known. I don't like that this screen is not properly centered the way YouTube's done it, but whatever, try and ignore it and focus. Um, yeah, I think stress, because, like, I was showing some of those weird hay fever signs for a while, but then what happened is I had therapy and my dad came to therapy and he had insisted on coming like a few weeks before. I think 3 weeks before, right before I went to the previous therapy session. He was yelling at me about shit and just saying some really hurtful crap and um like, he does this sort of thing where he'll lose his temper and then feel guilty about it later, but that doesn't stop the fact that I've had to go through that. Um, you know, it's kind of not fair to expect me to tolerate that all the time. Anyway, while he was all like, rah, 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 he's like, demanding a session with a therapist because blah, blah, blah. I'm tearing the family apart and all this kind of shit. Um, I can say that because I know my parents don't watch this. These they don't watch my YouTube. They don't give a shit. People on the internet give more of a shit about what I actually do in my life than my parents. They love and care for me, but in that sort of, like, physical kind of, like, here are your physical needs taken care of. They don't really know me, so they love the idea of me, I think. Which is an important distinction to me anyway. I guess because I have such an internal life. But anyway, yeah, so he had demanded that, and so finally this, you know, that day comes along and he came to therapy, and it was just like, I think some people go to therapy and don't realize that turning up isn't enough. You can't just turn up and expect to be fixed. You've actually got to do some work. But I think he had an idea that if he came to my therapy session, it would fix everything. And instead, like most of the session, he just called me selfish and ah, you know, just his entire interpretation of things. Oh my god, completely ignoring like so much shit that I've been through, so much stuff that I tolerate. I'm, I'm sure everyone watching this by now knows I've got a disabled brother, and that's so I've got the glass child trauma. Parents see through you, and you kind of learn to just, I don't know, you learn that your needs aren't worth anything. And I was a high achiever in school, but like I got my first 100% on a maths test and they were like, wow. But then the second one, or if I didn't get 100%, it's like, oh, why not 100? And then, later I got 100 again and it's like, well, shit, hey, that's just expected now, isn't it? And so there was a point where I just stopped telling my parents my marks and they'd find out by from a friend's parent or something, because I was just like, why? There's no point telling them about my achievements. Like, they don't, I had the feeling they don't give a shit. So there's that kind of thing. Anyway, so the glass child trauma, like, obviously having a disabled sibling, like he needs a lot of, and especially back then, didn't have NDIS back then, and my parents trying to figure out how to navigate the disability system. Like, I get it, but I was still just a child, with child level coping skills. My whole life turned on its head. I still had child needs, and I was being asked to cope in a more of an adult way. And I think that's all led to the whole schizoid thing and a lot of the depression and issues that I have. Yeah, and just listening to some of this shit, my disabled brother, his needs are now really well taken care of. He's really happy. He has no awareness of his own condition, so he doesn't actually suffer from it. He just has it. He doesn't suffer from it. And yeah, like he can get away with everything. Meanwhile, I'm very conscious of my own suffering. And more conscious than I've ever been in my life, I think, now that I've figured out the glass child trauma and, I've understand more about how I got this way. And I've tried to do things to solve that. Like last year, my previous therapist, she was saying, I should try and communicate more. And I guess that's to do with communicating your needs and trying to undo some of that, schizoid, keeping everything to yourself adaptations. But when I tried to communicate, then I would get pushback from my parents, and sometimes quite angry. And like every concession, like, last year, the main problem I was trying to work on with them was my sleep. They were doing dumb things like first thing in the morning, having him across the hall with the TV and just yelling pretty much in my direction. And then just like other things like that. Everything that we eventually did get some change happening, but everything that I asked that we ended up implementing, I had to fight for, like actually have verbal arguments with dad in particular, and occasionally with mum. Like there are some things that haven't changed. And even mum, she usually tries to avoid emotions and avoid problems, but every now and then she'll, let it out. Every one of those things I've had to have that sort of altercation for. That's not like, I think this is a very glass child thing to avoid conflict. And after a while, I just realized, like, I'm not the one with the communication problems. It's the way they're reacting to me that's the problem. And if they won't change that, what's the point in communicating? So, this year I've sort of gone more back into that more like just schizoid way of like, well, shit, there's no point trying kind of thing. I don't know where I was going with that. Just like, this therapy session, I did try talking. Like there's some recent shit that's happened. Like, can I say this on the internet? Maybe I won't say this, but we were going somewhere in the car, and I won't say why because I don't know how public the reason is. No, we were going somewhere in the car, and I was only going because I knew that people wanted me to be there. I was pretty tired because my disabled brother Mikey, he'd been up since like 5:40 and been screaming for an hour. And my parents don't hear this because they're on the other side of the house. So I'm the one who suffers. They had their nice sleep in, and I had yelling for an hour. And like I have trouble sleeping. I think I find it hard to wake up in the morning. I think the reason for that might be because when I did try to become a morning person, like, through age, when you're young, you wake up early, or you wake up a lot in the middle of the night as well when you're like a baby. But like when you're young, you wake up early, but then you go through your teenage years and you become more of an sort of an afternoon person. That's just the pattern. And then as you get older, you become more and more and more of a morning person. And then old people are like real morning people. And I think when I was going through the stage of trying to transition out of being a teenager into the more adult, like waking up again early again, what would happen is I would wake up early and my parents would just have me feed my little brother, instead of me being able to get on with my morning. And I realized there's no point getting out of bed because I'm just going to be made to do this stuff. And like it's gross feeding him. Um, Especially back then, and he couldn't handle a spoon himself, so you'd have to put it in his mouth. And yeah, I'm alive and I'm just complaining about my life. But if you want to distract me, go for it. But yeah, I think me failing to become a morning person goes back to some of that. And then on top of being like, having my morningness exploited that way, like I realized I could get out of it by just staying in bed. On top of that, like it's just so crowded and noisy. And as I've been less and less able to cope with things, I just don't want to be around all that morning noise and all the cheerful people. And so I think that's why I've become just not a morning person. And then also at night, things are quiet. Like right now, it's 10:45 p.m. Everyone's gone to bed. It's quiet. I can say what I need to. I know I'm not going to be interrupted. Unless dad has one of those insomnia nights, but I think, whatever. Um, yeah. So, we were driving somewhere, so I was trapped in the car as well. I hadn't slept well. I knew my mood was not good because when I wake up early, especially when I'm thinking about them having their nice sleep in, and here's me not getting enough sleep to function. Then I start thinking and have all the resentment and go through the whole glass child shit, which, so like, I kind of wish I hadn't figured out that that's my problem is, my childhood and whatever. But hey, cat's out of the bag, can't do anything about it. So, hey, look, the cat out of the bag. Uh, so, while I was in the car in the back seat, I was just trying to like, keep myself calm, go through the breathing exercises, all that kind of shit to just keep my shit together because, I had to go to this thing, social obligations, trying to do the right thing that other people want me to do. And then yeah, dad kept prodding me and asking me questions like, "Are you hungry?" And I'm like, fucking, just trying to concentrate on just keeping my mood stable and just having that. So then after a while, I think mum said something like, "Oh, is she grumpy?" And this sort of mocking thing. And I know it's because my parents can't handle my emotions, so they cope with it in these really unhealthy ways of like, belittling me and all that, because then they don't have to engage with the emotion properly, all that kind of stuff. And here's me constantly making excuses for them. Um, and when she said that, I was just like, look, he was up at 5:40, yelling for an hour. I'm tired, And then dad goes, well, that's just how it is. Like, there's no empathy, you know. I'm clearly struggling, and you have to go and like, and of course, I know that's how it is. I know that's the life that, like, that's not helpful when someone's depressed. Telling them that's how life is, it's kind of not the way to handle it. Like, I'm trying to find reasons to stay in existence because I don't know how I'm allowed to say it on YouTube, but if you get my meaning and you're telling me this is just how life is, can't change it, everything's going to be shit forever, that's the last thing a depressed person really needs to hear. And so, like, because I was so tired as well, it was just hard to control the emotions, and so I got upset. And then, hearing, mum's like, oh, is she crying? And them talking some shit as if I can't hear it. And, mum's also like, do you want to go home? And I'm like, oh my God, I was there because I'm doing my social obligations, which, of course, my parents didn't actually know what we were going to actually. But yeah, like, I was doing something that's not for me. I was going because I felt I had to for other people. Anyway, so that's sort of like, to me, where the incident started. The next day, I was talking to my brother. I feel like I've told this story before, but maybe it was on another live stream. Maybe it was on a Stardew stream, and a lot of people don't watch those, except Jazzy Person and a few of our Stardew crew. Anyway, yeah. So then the next day, I was talking to my brother. He'd come to visit, and I'd taken my dog for a walk and sort of come back home. And yeah, I was talking to him as I came back. Like, he was just leaving, and then it's like, how are you doing? Because he actually checks on me. Like, I can talk to my brother. This is my other brother, the not disabled one. He doesn't live with us anymore. I can talk to him, and it's safe. Like, I can say some stuff that's actually really difficult for normal people to hear, like really morbid stuff, and I know it's uncomfortable for him, but he doesn't get angry at me, and he doesn't give me like this shit, and he doesn't run away like mum does. I can talk to him, and I actually feel like he cares. Like, he's gotten really good at that. But yeah, and I can also cry, and he'll do the whole like comforting thing. Whereas if I cry, my parents, they can't even do the Sheldon thing of like, there, Sheldon's here, nerd, 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 awkward nerd. Like, they can't even do that. When I cry, if my parents catch me, because I do my crying mostly in private, but there have been occasions where I haven't been able to keep it in, or they've walked in on me on the kitchen floor, and mum's response tends to be to just disappear somewhere, avoid it. And then dad, well, the kitchen incident, he just sort of stood around going, oh, this is bad, do we need to go to hospital, kind of thing. And it's like, fucking just be a parent and comfort your kid. Yeah, just making me feel like, the fuck's the point? And it's interesting because, like, now, like, I've cried in front of my brother and my godmother, and, like, you can tell that they're upset to see me that way because they start struggling not to cry, because, yeah, they can see that I'm upset, whereas my parents are just, like, have this really weird response, and I know it's because they can't cope, and they don't have the emotional maturity the way that my godmother and my brother do. But I mean, that's just a sign that they need help, but they won't admit they need help. And so, like, I'm stuck doing all the work and trying to fix my issues when they're part of the issue, but they won't. It's difficult. Anyway, so yeah, I was sitting with my brother and got to that point where I was crying, and yeah, then, but because, I'd just been walking my dog, and so he was running around the front yard and he was barking at things, and eventually my parents came out, and I think dad came out first, and was like, to my brother, oh, you're still here, you might as well take some croissants home. So then he went and got mum, and mum brought out some croissants, but of course I'm still crying this whole time. Mum sees me crying, hands over the croissants, and like fucking disappears. And then dad, I think he disappeared briefly, but then he came back. And because I'd mentioned the sleeping thing in the car, they think that's my only problem. They don't realize that their responses to me are part of the problem, because, like, I don't even know how to tell them that. They're so emotionally unintelligent that if I tell them that, I don't see it going down well. What a shit show. But yeah, so they think that my only problem is sleep. Goodness me. And so dad, um, he came up with this suggestion. So like I've got this room, this is my bedroom, this is where I sleep. And then my brother's old room, he's moved out. I've sort of taken it over, turned it into a bit of a studio because I did have the studio in Balgala, but like trying to go there once a week, leaving the house, it was getting a bit too much. Like my mental health has gotten to that stage that I just struggling to leave the house. And then also that place was getting more and more crowded as more people moved in. And it was just because it's open plan, it was getting too much to try and do my art there. So yeah, first chance I got, I brought all my shit home and put it in there. So I've got all my art and music stuff. But you know, as soon as I brought it home, as soon as I set it up, my cousin from Japan came to visit, and she was here for like 4.5 months. It was meant to be 3 months, almost became 6 months, but 4.5 months. And she's only just left a week ago, actually. So, and like, I think actually the creative stuff is more important to me than I've been conscious of previously. I know it sounds kind of dumb to have not known that, but then, you know, the whole schizoid thing, having a personality disorder, also being depressed, like it's very easy to just block shit out and not be aware of things. Even though like I seem really self-aware, I know there's so much stuff that I just don't understand about myself and I'm still working out. Anyway, so yeah, like this is in the context of me having not been able to use it for months already. And then dad comes out with this suggestion, like, you know, upstairs they've got a study. And so for the last couple weeks of my cousin staying here, her mum, my aunt, was actually going to come from Japan as well. And they'd go to Fiji in the middle of it. But then, so where's she going to stay? Originally, she was going to stay in that studio space as well. Because, like I said, there's this huge double bed in there. It's absolutely unnecessary. Like, so like I've got this studio space, but I'm having to tolerate this fucking double bed in there. So, you know, they could just, you know, is it that weird to sleep in there together if that's, you know, all that's available? No. So what my parents did is they decided to clean their study up because dad's not working. He retired a few months back. So he doesn't need the study as much for like work from home stuff. And I mean, I helped him choose a new laptop to buy since he didn't have his work one anymore. And mum's got a laptop that I also helped her buy. So, you know, I help him with all the tech stuff. And they kind of just carry them around the house anyway and come downstairs and, you know, at the dining room table, they've got these laptops and, you know, so they're moving them all around the place. They started cleaning up the study and then put a bed in there for my aunt to stay in. And then so Dan comes out with this idea and he's like, you know, I'm to get back to the scene, I'm outside the front of the house with my brother. We've been talking. I'm crying because, you know, talking about emotional shit and, you know, trying to deal with the home situation. And yeah, so dad comes back having seen me cry and mum's run off and he comes back out and he's like, oh, you know, we've got this idea. We could set up that room upstairs, the study, and you could sleep up there and it'll be heaps quiet. But we still need a space for all our study stuff. So what if we swapped that study for the studio space and you can have that upstairs instead? And it just upset me more because I mean, you know, sleep isn't the only problem. There's so much stuff he didn't think about. Like, you know, for those of you who've been watching a while, I was talking about, you know, teaching metal vocals in that front room. I haven't even talked to them about that studio space, teaching metal vocals in there. I was going to wait until my cousin left because I didn't want to say, you know, I didn't want to talk about what a huge impact her being in there had on me and my creative life and my mood, and just trying to keep my shit together, not being able to be creative. Because they told me in the beginning that I would still be able to go in there, but then she came here and, oh, hang on. Did it just play an ad by itself? That's the first time I've seen that happen. I'm sorry. I'm sorry about the ad thing. Um, where was I? I think when I do Stardew, because I can't actually see the screen, I don't know when the ads are playing, and then it just told me that there's an ad playing. Anyway, to try and get back to the story. Yeah, I was gonna wait until after she left, so then I could talk more about, like, the impact that, you know, that had on me. And, like, yeah, so she would close the door, and it's kind of weird because we're not really closed door people around here, and, like, it just felt kind of weird because it's like, is it okay for me to, like, I didn't know socially, can I go in there and be like, "Hey, I actually need to use this room?" And then the sort of Japanese cultural stuff, I wasn't sure how to navigate that, and I just I did try and do some art in there while she was out working 'cause she found herself a job, or, like, while she was out doing other stuff, but then she came home while I was still working on a thing. It was actually for Scribe Chronicler. I was finishing working on the last thing for him, and, it just felt super awkward. Like, she felt like I got vibes like she felt like I was in her space when actually it's supposed to be my space, and so after that, I just felt like I couldn't really go in there and be creative. Um, so yeah, I was gonna wait until after she left to sort of take up the issue with my parents and be like, "Hey, I wanna do this in this room. Is that okay? And here are some things the room needs fixing up." But yeah, then dad had this. So I'm getting ahead of myself. But yeah, so I still haven't talked to them about that anyway. Yeah, so dad had this idea of, like, switching these rooms, and there's just so much. Like, for one thing, that study upstairs, it's not that big and it has a low ceiling as well, which changes the mood of the room. Um, in terms of sleeping, like, in theory, it's upstairs. It's not quite directly over the main living kitchen area, but it is over some things, but you're still gonna get some noise. So I don't know, I think during the pandemic, I went up there and tried to film some vlogs, um, but I could still hear too much, and I just felt uncomfortable up there. Like, it was better just staying in here and just tolerating stuff. Um, this is actually the darkest room in the house. Up there, if you like, a lot of light comes in. Light doesn't bother me when I'm sleeping though, because I sleep with a pillow over my head. I don't know if that's a death wish, but, like, just um, it doesn't really keep the noise out, but it does keep extra light out. And then I've gotten to this stage where it just feels comforting in a way to have the pillow over my head. Now I sort of keep a little peephole so I can breathe, but well, focus. Um, yeah. uh, I don't know. That's probably just a weird thing I do, sleeping with a pillow on my head. Um, so yeah, light isn't a huge issue, but things they haven't thought about. Yeah, there's the size difference, and also the studio space. It has the bedroom space, but it also has this, like, extra wardrobe space, which I've been using for storage, um, and could potentially do some recording in occasionally. Although there's the sound, it's right next to the streets. The soundproofing, like, there's still a lot of noise, but it would separate me from the house, the main house, I guess. Um, so there's things, like, about the size of the space. Also, my dog really needs to be in the same. He needs to have freedom. Like, the reason my door is usually ajar is because he's like a cat. He wants to go in and out all the time, and if he can't get into my room, he scratches. And, like, this is one of the problems with sleep as well, is I have to leave the door ajar, otherwise he scratches, and then I have to get up, open the door and let him in, and, like, keep getting up to let him in and out, and that is more disruptive to my sleep than just leaving it ajar. Um, so, if I'm upstairs, what's he gonna do? He's going to bang on we've got this little gate at the bottom of the stairs. It used to lock, doesn't lock anymore. He's gonna bang on that until he can, he's figured out how to open it himself. And then he'll come up the stairs and then he'll scratch on the door and I'll still have that kind of a problem. So that's one thing they haven't thought about. And the other thing is, okay, maybe they could control him and keep him downstairs, keep him in that section of the house where there are a bunch of doors they can close. But I've actually already kind of tried that. So sometimes I pick him up, put him out into that area, close all the doors so he can't get through. But because no one really pays attention to him and his needs, he slips past them because he's a smart dog, and then he gets in here. So I've tried to close my door and then he'll come in anyway. If they could control him, I would be able to close my door and we wouldn't have that issue in the first place, So, but, trying to explain that to him, they'd be like, oh, yeah, we can do that. But they don't. It's interesting to see how they interact with him because there's a parallel to how they interact with me. They don't notice him a lot of the time, and they don't. I can tell from his body language and how he's acting what he wants, or, that he's trying to tell me something. They don't pick that up. And I don't know if this is a me thing. Maybe it's because I'm close to him, or maybe because I connect better with animals than people, which is kind of funny with me wearing the fluffy hat. That's not intentional, I swear. It's just warm and I like it. But yeah, no, maybe there's some connection there. Even when he had his big health crisis in 2020, I heard his voice change. And sure enough, when they did a CT, they did find there was some swelling and maybe bleeding in his throat. And they're like, how the hell did you know that? And I'm like, well, his voice changed. And they're like, how do you notice that though? I don't know, if you know, if you know your dog, wouldn't you hear the voice change? But even my parents who live with the same dog and hear him bark, they didn't pick up his voice change. Is it because I'm a vocalist, or is it just because I pay attention? I think it's probably just because I pay attention. They just don't. Yeah, they just don't pay attention to his needs. And yeah, I do see a parallel with me there. They give him more attention than they give me, though. I guess I'm not as cute. And it's easier to scapegoat me. Anyway, so there's that problem. And then in terms of artistic stuff, right? Let's say, so they're like, oh, you could use this room for the art studio. Trouble with this room, as I've mentioned, it's the darkest room in the house. I've tried doing art in here for years. That's what I did before I had a studio. Most of my art was created in this room until I had the studio. I tried painting things out in the other room, especially when I was doing oils, because the ventilation in here isn't so great. So I was painting more where there actually is air and a direct line to the outdoors. But of course they got the shits with all my oil stuff being out and about, so stopped doing that, didn't I? But I did do one good painting with him. Yeah, otherwise I've done stuff in here. The thing about this room though, because it's dark, it's just not conducive to that kind of creativity. I don't think, because my parents, because they're finance types, I don't think they understand how the mood of a place can affect that creative vibe. They don't get it. So there's that, and then also the space in here. It's the space difference and the lack of storage spaces, and there's just all these kinds of things that they're not even aware of. Some things they haven't thought about, like my dog. The thing about the art stuff, they wouldn't even know. They can't comprehend. They're not creative people. They don't understand these kinds of things, like the mood, the vibe. That's important. I can't do certain types of art in here. I can do YouTube videos. That's fine. I can do music to some extent. But what I've been craving, for years now, I've realized this space does not have natural light. But I can't really do stuff in other parts of the house, because also the room across the hall, that actually has a decent amount of light, but that's where the big TV is with all the fancy speakers, and so someone's always fucking watching the TV in there. And then where else? There's nowhere else in the house where I can get natural light and do stuff without being actually outside, and it's been a really cold winter. for Sydney standards. I'm Aussie, like I'm a wimp when it comes to the cold temperatures. Um, yeah, it's too cold. I think that's part of the reason I haven't done bonsai. I mean, I haven't had the energy to work on my bonsai. But also I just don't want to be outdoors in this cold. Like I'm small. And I don't know if you've ever heard, like, those things about how aircon is sexist or whatever, but females generally, I think, get cold faster. Also, I'm tiny. I don't have a lot of fat on me. I get cold easily. That's, like the fact that I haven't been able to work, the main plus of that is I haven't had to go out to the bonsai place, which is not heated. And so I have to wear like layers of heat tech every winter. And I'm still kind of cold unless I've been like really getting into something and being a bit more physical. Um, and then the heat tech is okay. But then I have to go to the toilet. And it's just like this shack. And I have to peel off my layers of heat tech to be able to go pee. And it's fucking freezing. I'm glad I haven't had to do that this year. Like, as much as it sucks not being able to work, I'm just like, maybe I am sort of wondering, like, maybe bonsai isn't right for me. Like, maybe physically I'm just not up for it. Um, there's good things about that job, but there's also difficult things. And, the fact that I always have a headache the next day and I'm always worn out and can't do anything the next day, it's probably a sign from my body that it's not coping. Yeah, anyway, no, so, like, that artistic stuff, parents completely oblivious in terms of, like, switching the rooms around. Other problems is, like, when I'm like, I often don't just sleep through, and if I have to get up to go to the bathroom, for example, in here, I have the bathroom just through there. So I get up, I stumble out of bed, I go do my business, I stumble back to bed. But if I'm upstairs, then what I've gotta do is get up, go down the stairs, get myself into the bathroom, do my business, come out, go back up the stairs, go back in the room, go and lie down. And by then, I don't know if this happens for other people, but the more stuff I do, when I've been sleepy, the more the metabolism kicks up, and then it sort of gets really weird. And even though I need sleep, my brain's like, and then it gets really hard to get back to sleep. Sometimes in the morning they'll forget to close some of the doors out there, and so it's just like blast of their conversation or whatever, and so I get up and I close the doors. Doing that once, not so bad, but if they do it again, especially in a short period of time, and I have to get up again to close all the doors, that fucks me up. And also, as my metabolism kicks up, other weird things happen with my body. I start overheating, my heart rate gets a bit weird, and it just like screws up everything. So like they don't know this, but if I have to pee in the middle of the night, come downstairs, go back up, like that's not going to help my sleep. It's actually going to do the opposite. So there's that, like these practical things that they don't know about my life and how sleep works for me. So there's that problem as well. And of course that would alert my dog to me being out and about, so he'd kick up a fuss again as well. And I worry about my dog too, because like he gets stressed, and so if you change the routine too much, when he gets stressed, he gets stomach issues, and then when he's sad, I get more stressed. Like honestly, he really looks after me in that sort of, I guess, emotional sense. Like, some days during this whole COVID thing when I've been feeling really bummed, he'll curl up with me. When I turn on the light, he's always so happy to see me awake. And sometimes I've just felt too groggy, but then he'll be like cheering me up, and I'll finally find some energy to get up and, have something to eat. I do his probiotics and whatever. Sometimes I've done his probiotics and then just come back to bed. But then later in the day, he's like, "Oh, you're up again? Party time." And then I'm like, okay, fine, I'll eat something instead of starving myself to death, which is kind of tempting sometimes, but probably not a smart idea, because I don't want to suffer. Like, as much as I don't want to be here in this existence, I also don't want to be suffering while I'm here. So, yeah, I don't like pain. Yeah, anyway, so there's just like lots of things like that in terms of my parents, not understanding my life or how my life works, and wanting to take away my studio that I haven't even finished properly setting up yet because my cousin came. I've still got all this stuff that I was going to rearrange and like try and set up a filming space here maybe for like doing covers especially. Although I have the green screen now to have more options, but in terms of like those audio things, this room is quieter because it's not right next to traffic. It doesn't have broken windows right next to traffic. So yeah, I still need to make space in here to try and do some filming, whether I use the green screen or the black curtains. One way or another, I got to do it in here. So I need to like clean all this stuff up, set things up, make it easy for me to film covers, because the less steps there are, the more likely I am to actually do the thing. That's how I have to hack my brain, the depression that makes me want to not do anything, is I have to make things as easy as possible, low effort, remove all the barriers. So yeah, but like, because my cousin came and she filled up all the shelves with all her shit. I couldn't do that, could I? I couldn't set up my life, essentially. Like, my life is screwed up anyway, but I'm trying to find, like, what bits of life I can still turn into something. YouTube seems to be one of the ways that I can actually do something in life. And people don't hate it. People like some of the stuff I do. Wow, I'm contributing to society in my small way. I've even helped some people by accident, but I still helped people. So there you are. That's me being a member of society. Yeah, anyway, where was I going with that? Sorry, I'm trying not to cough, but it is a bit of a struggle. Anyway, yeah, no. So there's a lot of stuff my parents haven't thought about there. Just the practicalities of everything. There's different sizes. Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so like back to setting the scene. I'm out the front of the house crying. My brother's comforting me. My dad's made this suggestion. And I was just like, I had been thinking about the metal vocals teaching thing, which is another thing that room is perfect for because it's the first room in the house. So if I have to invite a stranger over here, they can just come straight into that room. They don't have to come into the rest of the house. They have their lesson and they fuck off. Maybe they need to go to the toilet. That's probably the closest they get to going anywhere else in the house. But mostly they come in, they fuck off. Perfect. Perfect for teaching. Whereas if my parents make me change that, suddenly it's less of a thing. I mean, I guess they could come in here. I don't know. But then they're coming further into the house, and I mean, that's my bathroom. Then it becomes more of a public bath. I don't fucking know. Anyway, no, so I had that in my mind, like I want to turn it into a teaching space. Potentially, like I might have one student a year, but it's still a thing. And like other things I wanted to fix up in that room because I don't know, we're so cheap. I guess they're finance types, so they try and squeeze every penny. And I was brought up thinking we were poor when we kind of weren't. I went to a private school, but I thought I was poor. Like, that's what my parents made me think. The local public school is actually not that bad. Like, they had actual guitars and stuff that you could borrow and just strum away on. Anyway, never mind my lost childhood. Yeah, no, we're super stingy. So, like, broken windows, doors that don't close properly, leaky roof thingy in there. I have a list of things that need to get done. I think I talked about that in another video. Anyway, so like I had been thinking about all this stuff. Dad's made this suggestion, and I'm just like, it's so opposite to what I was thinking about. It's so opposite to what I wanted. And then here he is making this horrible suggestion to take away my studio space. That's how I see it. He thinks he's giving me a sleeping spot, but to my perspective, it's taking away my studio space, taking away my creativity. And I was already in such an upset state, and I just said, "Luke, I have a different idea. I don't want to talk about it." And he fucked off. And then my brother's like, "Well, at least he's trying." And I said, "Yeah, but this is fucking terrible." Yeah. Anyway, so that was that incident. Then it might have been the next day. I don't even remember. My sense of time is really screwed up, especially like having been in bed all week with COVID. Then what happened is, like I wanted to have this conversation with mum present because they're both my parents and they're both in charge of the house. And yeah, but then dad, like, she left maybe with my relatives. I don't even remember. I just remember suddenly I'm alone with dad and he's like, "Have you thought any more about our proposal?" And I said, "I don't want to think about it." Because, like I've realized I can't communicate with my parents. And so what do you do instead is you just don't talk about stuff, um, especially when you're not ready. And so I tried that. I was like, "I don't want to talk about it." He's like, "Well, I just hope I'll be ready to talk about it when you are." Like, it's weird because he's trying to help me. In his mind, he's trying to help me. But then at the same time, he does this like sarcastic bullshit. And it's like, are you trying to help me or are you trying to hurt me? Make up your fucking mind. Um, anyway, like I know that's from his own frustration, but he doesn't really see the contradiction, I guess, in the way that he's behaving towards me. Um, I don't remember if that's the same day that shit hit the fan. It might be. Again, sense of time completely off. But so that day that I was going to therapy, not my last therapy session, the one beforehand, like I was in the middle of getting ready for therapy and suddenly like all this like just yeah, criticizing me and like, "Oh, your mother's been cleaning up this room upstairs." And like as if she was doing it for me. She was doing it for her sister to have a place to stay, but he was acting like it was being done for me. "Your mother's doing this." And I think I worked out, so in my disabled brother's room, there's a fan in the ceiling. It's a really strong fan. Because he still wears nappies, it smells. You turn on the fan, takes the smell away. But it's really strong. And so I realized that it was suctioning the door open. And so when he and the carer are in there in the morning, um, a lot of their noise was coming through into the hallway, and it was just like it was a bit too much. And so I figured out that that's what was going on, and I was just like, "Hey, can you put the door snake down to like weigh the door closed?" And she's like, "Yep, fine." And then I just messaged my parents like, "Hey, I found this problem. Here's the solution." I gave them the solution. I didn't just say, "Here's a problem." I said, "Here is a solution." But apparently that wasn't enough for my parents, and so mum went to Bunnings and brought these like weird foam things instead of just set up the door so that it would close better with all these weird it's hard to describe and I can't take this camera and show you. She decided to fix it that way. It's changed some of the dynamics of the door. But like, it does the job, it works. But I didn't ask for that. And dad's all like, "And your mother's done this to the door and blah blah because of you, and she's also not using the fan because of you." And I'm like, I didn't ask for anyone. I'm thinking, I'm not a confrontational person in real life. I can talk to the camera being like, "This stuff sucks," but in real life I tend to shut down. And so what I was thinking is like, I didn't ask them to stop using the fan. I said, "Here's a problem, here's a solution. Where's the problem?" But no, apparently mum was trying not to use the fan. The fan noise wasn't the problem. It was the fan opening the door, letting their noise of them yelling and whatever. That was the problem anyway. And so he's like blaming me for that. That's mum's decision if she tries to fix it that way. That wasn't something I asked for, but I got blamed for it anyway. And just all this stuff and how they're walking on eggshells. And dad actually said that I'm tearing the family apart, which, someone with mental illness, gee, that's what and mental illness caused by their behavior in a lot of ways. That's something I really needed to hear, isn't it? Like normal people with depression who go on to try and end it, what they often say is that they felt like a burden and that everyone would be better off without them. Um, Now, I don't have that. I think the schizoid thing has sort of made it easier for me to not think like that. Like, I most people, normal people with depression, tend to think that they're the problem. I've noticed for myself and a lot of other schizoids, it seems to be more, no, the world is the problem, not me. So that's a difference in perspective. And I think that's kind of lucky, because if I did have those feelings of being a burden, and then here's dad telling me, oh, you're tearing the family apart, like that could have set off a really negative chain of events, if you get my meaning. He's kind of telling me that I'm a burden. And yeah, it turned into this big thing. And like, I think I did say, like, sleep's not my only problem. And he's like, you don't talk to us, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, because you always yell at me. You yell at me when I do. And he kept yelling at me. And I said, exactly like this. And he just kept going off. Like, I think he sort of knew I was right, but he can't accept it in the moment. He knows he loses his temper, but does nothing about it to fix it. And like, he'll go off and then have the guilt later. But that doesn't, like, I've already had to go through the going off, and it hurts. It does hurt. I think, as much as I've developed the schizoid stuff, that sort of, there is the inner child kind of thing that is still there. Like that, the schizoid thing is protecting the child in a way. Like a lot of these maladaptive coping mechanisms happen to protect that sort of child part of you. And so I think that that's still there. And as an instinct, we all kind of do have this connection to our parents. Like when you're young, especially for humans, like you need your parents to survive. So you form that instinctive connection, even if later, like, you have negative feelings towards your parents, there's still that instinct thing. And instinct is really like entrenched. And I think that's what makes it hurt. Because, like other people can say shit to me and I'm just like, who are you? You don't matter. Why would I give a shit what you think? Or people can compliment me too, and I'm just like, yeah. When it comes to my parents though, like, yeah, when he's doing that kind of thing, it does hurt. Now with the complimenting things, I guess my parents just didn't do that enough. Didn't really make me feel like my achievements were ever enough. And the boys got all the attention. Because, the youngest with the disabilities, and then the middle one, he's into sport. They like sport. They don't understand my interests. Yeah, and then, me being the high achiever, it was easier for me to become self-sufficient, not ask them for help, doing all this kind of shit. Anyway, I'm really like going on a ramble. Where do we pick up the story? Yeah, he's just yelling me at all this kind of crap, and talking about how my sleep problems are such an issue for the family, and like if I went and slept upstairs, that would fix all these problems. And I actually said, so would killing myself. I don't usually use that because I know that's like a thing that people do to try and guilt people into getting your own way. I think particularly, is it borderline where people kind of use that against you, and it's kind of an abusive thing. So the way that a lot of people use that. But I was genuinely feeling that. It's like, I'm being given all this shit. I'm being told I'm a burden. And I don't want to be here. I'm here because I got to look after my dog, and I don't like pain, and I don't like the risk that I'm going to fail and end up being like in a wheelchair with my freedoms gone and my pain, like, having pain and all that. Those are the two main reasons I stay alive. And then also I realized that other people want me here. That's not a huge factor for me, but I'm aware of it. I'm aware that not being here is more selfish than just leaving, even though that's what I want. But yeah, in that sort of like, so I don't enjoy life. And he's just telling me like all this kind of crap, essentially telling me I'm being a burden. And yeah, it got pretty heated. Oh shit, I forgot about my tea. Oh my god. It's probably dead cold. Look how much there is. sorry to go from like super moody to almost choking on my own cough. Um, oh, it's doing an ad countdown. Well, while it does the ad thing, I'll just like sip some more of this over the top of my ulcers. Hang on. Oh. Ah. Mm. How much can I? It's a little bit painful because with the nuclear mouth ulcers, some of them are speckled around my lip, and then there's some under my tongue, and then there's some further in the back of my throat, I assume, because that's where it feels like, and I can't reach back there to numb it. And even when I numb these ones at the front, it doesn't really do very much. Mm. Anyway, so where was I? Yeah, it's pretty painful. Dad, yeah, it was a really bad exchange, and so I was really upset, and I was getting ready for therapy. And he briefly left me alone, but then came back and demanded to come to therapy. Because they're the ones walking on eggshells. As if I'm not walking on eggshells, trying to deal with my mental health, trying not to get yelled at and criticized. Bloody hell. And they talk about walking on eggshells with my sleep, right? That's the main issue that they know about is the sleep. Thing is, there's still all these loud footsteps up and down the hallway outside my door. There's still a lot of doors being closed roughly. And like one day, I heard Dad finally close the door gently, and then he came in here to talk to me. And I'm like, and this is while I was sick too. I was like, you close the door gently to not wake me up. You don't close the door gently and then come and you don't even know if I'm awake. So you're essentially waking me up, as far as you know. I don't know. It's just like if you were walking on eggshells, you might actually have some soft footsteps. I learned to do soft footsteps because when we were growing up, it was always, don't wake Mikey, don't wake Mikey. And so I learned to walk quietly. But now it's me when we're all grown up and I have the sleeping problem and no one's saying don't wait. Like, I mean, I guess they are trying, so I'll give them that. But it's just like, if you were really walking on eggshells, you'd be doing a lot more than just the things that I've asked. Yeah, anyway. But yeah, like this whole shit about I'm tearing the family apart. Like, way to be scapegoated. Anyway, so yeah, then 3 weeks later, I finally get to the therapy session, and as I mentioned before, he's telling me I'm selfish. Like, erasing everything I've been through in life. I was the good student. I've actually done a Patreon. I'm finally, yeah, anyway, my cult members know about that. But yeah, so, just like, yeah, sort of telling me I'm selfish in that session, and him misunderstanding the issue. Like, to him, the whole thing was about this room, this sleeping room. But I was able to identify the trigger point was actually when we were in the car and and I hadn't slept well. And that's what set this all off, because it was about them refocusing on my sleep and coming up with all the wrong solutions to help my sleep. And then, yeah, like that's the start of the sequence of events. But to him, it's only just like the room thing. And like, that's supposed to help me, but then they get angry at me if I don't instantly accept that solution. And like, one of the things he said in that session was that I always think I'm right. And I always like, my solution has to be the only way. He's completely projecting. He has no clue that he's the one who suggested this terrible solution and expects me to just go along with it. And I haven't even had a chance to explain to him all the reasons that it's a crap idea. He's just like, assumes that I couldn't possibly have good reasons that I don't want to swap my studio for that shitty space just to sleep in and not even have a guarantee of sleep and have all these other issues. He's just assumed that his way is right. And he's accusing me of thinking my way is right. Like, I've got a whole bunch of reasons, whereas his only reason for wanting me to go up there is because he thinks I'll sleep better. Like, that's it. There's not really any depth to it. Whereas when I think about why I don't want to go up there, I have like this, hour-long ramble about whatever. I know I didn't spend the whole hour on that issue, but I spent a good chunk of time on that issue. There's a lot of that projecting, and I think some of calling me selfish, I think, is a bit of projecting as well, because if I'm selfish, it means they can feel better about how I've been treated in my life, the things that I've had to put up with, the sacrifices that I've had to make, particularly as a child, but still to some extent today. Um, you know, they can feel better in that sense, and then also they can have their needs met and refuse to meet mine in a lot of ways. It's a little bit complicated, it gets confused in my head, but I think there is an element of that. Like, I know that some of the things I do can come across as selfish. Um, I'm aware of that, but I don't think he's aware of his side of it, and I don't think mum is either. They just think, "Oh, they look after me and give me food and somewhere to sleep and stuff." Um, and, like, I get that, I appreciate that, because if they kicked me out, I would fucking die. I would not do well as a homeless person, and then I would have even less reason to stay alive, so I probably would just die. Um, uh, but yeah, then the thing is, though, like, I wouldn't be in this state where I can't look after myself if I had more of a normal childhood and if I'd had my needs met. Um, you know, Having a disabled brother, like, I had to learn things like what to do if he has an epileptic seizure. I had to learn that when I was very young, so young I don't even remember. It's just something I've known my whole life. Turn him on his side. Um, I once timed one of his seizures with my Tamagotchi. Like, most kids were using their Tamagotchi as a toy. I was using it as a medical device. Because I didn't have a watch then, like, this is pre-smartphones and pre-kids having gadgets. That was my gadget. It had a clock on it, and so I filmed his seizure. This was at a bowling alley because 'cause they'd gone on ahead, weren't even paying attention to where I was. My brother had fallen over having a seizure. I've got to roll him on his side, time him, wait for someone to get some help. This is stuff that I was doing when I was really, really fucking young. Um, Going to, like, these education groups, the young carer group. Now, young carer, at the time, like, in the past when I've heard the phrase young carer, it sounds like it makes sense. Now, I actually think it's kind of disgusting that you're expecting young people to care in that capacity. Like, they haven't even reached adulthood yet, and they're having their childhood taken away to care for someone else, whether that's a disabled sibling or a parent in some cases. Um, a child shouldn't have to do that. But because I grew up with it, I didn't know that it was weird. It was just my life. And people would say, throughout my life, people have been like, "Oh, it must be so hard having a disabled brother." And I would always be like, "Oh, no, it's always been this way. It's fine." And I don't think I realized how much I suffered. Because, my parents are so focused on him. And I realized, like, and then also, like, the religious aspect, I think, does have some crap in there as well. Because, like, one of the toxic things that I was told is that because my disabled brother, because like, he's intellectually disabled as well as some physical issues, because he can't understand right from wrong. I mean, he totally can. He knows when he's being naughty, but at the time, I was told because he can't understand right from wrong, he's essentially an angel sent from God and all this kind of shit. And I'm like, fuck off. And, like, when you're a kid, also, like, angels are these magical creatures and they're special, and so you're not special. The disabled kid is. And so, you aren't as deserving of love because you're not a fucking angel, is kind of the message that the kid gets, even if the parent doesn't mean it that way. That is kind of the message, is you're not good enough. And, as I said, I was a high achiever in school. Not good enough. Still not getting whatever it was I needed from my parents, that sort of approval. There were also incidents like, so, my brother, he went to a special school, so like all disabled kids, and they'd have this yearly concert. And it's actually kind of cute the way they do it, because like even with the kids in wheelchairs, they would dress up the wheelchair itself and then push them around and like spin them in the wheelchair. And the choreography with wheelchairs, there's actually kind of cleverly done. And then dress up my little brother. He mostly wasn't in a wheelchair, like only when he was having real trouble with his cerebral palsy, mostly walking slowly. They dress him up as like a frog or grease lightning kind of thing, and have them doing basic stuff where the staff members would help them do movements and all this kind of stuff. So they had their little concerts. Brad Hazard, the old health minister, used to go to those all the time. So like a politician actually getting engaged and all that, whatever. Anyway, so I can't remember. This might have been when I went to music school, because I think he would have still been in his last year of school, and so he still would have had a concert. I don't know the exact timing, but basically what happened is I had a concert. My parents didn't come. That's fine. They don't come to a lot of shit. I mean, they did come to things when I was much younger, but I don't know. It would have been fine for them not to come, because like I think it would have been a uni kind of thing. Okay, fine. You don't need to come to uni stuff. I'm an adult now. But what happened is they got mad at me for not wanting to come to my little brother's concert. And it was just like, I think the mismatch of expectations, and like, they're expecting me to go to his concert, but they didn't want to come to my one. It's just like this kind of jarring thing. I don't know what word describes it, but it's just like, is it a double standard? I don't know. Like, I remember that being kind of hurtful, and sort of pointing out to them, like, they're getting mad at me for this, but they didn't even come to my concert. It's just like those kinds of bullshit kinds of things. So like that's like, I mean, they don't even know what I do on YouTube. They don't, like, YouTube is a huge part of my life, actually. And they're just not in it. My godmother sometimes watches my YouTube. And so when she tells me that she loves me and cares for me, it's believable. With my parents, in this therapy session, Dad said that he loves me and cares about me, wants me to be happy, but then he's saying I'm selfish and all this kind of shit, and it's like, I don't feel it. And on the selfish thing as well, I explained things like that car incident. I laid out that that's the start of this whole thing, being in the car. The only reason I went is because I knew we were going, we were meeting people, and that everyone wanted me to be there for this sort of special event. I don't understand why it's so important for me to be there. I just know that other people get good feelings when I go to certain things. So I was going there for them. I wasn't going there for me. I was tolerating all this crap for other people. Didn't register on his radar that is an unselfish thing for me to do. Also, I brought up an example of, like, mostly with emotions, mum will run away. She's Japanese, they're not good with emotions to start with, and I think she's got her own issues. Her mum kind of did exploit her, when her dad died young, and so she's got her own baggage. Also the Japanese culture, yeah, not good for mental health. But of course, that's, instead of her dealing with her problems, it's now my problem because she can't handle my emotions. But one time, usually she'll run away, but the one of the times where she did have a go at me was because I suggested, like with my sleep problems, once Mikey got COVID, this is a while back. I probably did have COVID then, but it was so mild it didn't register on a rat. This is the first time I've actually had COVID register on a rat, and that was a really strong red line, holy shit. But when he had COVID, after that, his sleep cycle got really screwed up. He was waking up at 4:30 in the morning. Like 5:30 is bad enough. 4:30 in the morning. And I was the one having to deal with that. And so I, at the time he was going to bed, maybe around 6 p.m. And so I asked them, like, can we push his bedtime back? Because that might keep him in bed longer. And then I won't suffer these 4:30 a.m. Like, even my psychologist is like, that's not fair for you to be my psychologist was saying I would be pissed off too. So, sometimes I don't even know if I'm allowed to feel these things because I'm so used to living in this environment where my needs are like, sort of pushed aside that I'm like, am I asking for too much to not be woken up at 4:30? And my psychologist is like, no, that's fair. You shouldn't be woken up at 4:30 in the morning. So, I still had to have the fight with my parents to get my brother to stay up later so that he wouldn't wake up at 4:30 in the morning. But that's created another problem because if he's not going to bed early, then he sort of complains, like he always wants attention. If he's not getting attention, he complains, and it's this really annoying noise. Like, how baby cries are annoying? They're annoying on purpose because they're trying to get your attention because it's a survival thing, evolution, blah, blah. Imagine that, but in a grown man's voice. And it's so unrefined that he actually uses his false chords as well in part of that. Anyway, vocal nerding aside, the false chords have helped clear some of the crap from my throat, I gotta say, though, because I can clear my throat very powerfully, but still kind of choke on it a bit. Anyway, no, so because he's awake, one of the things I suggested is like, Mum keeps talking about how we have all this NDIS funding, so, we can get someone in for an extra few hours here and there. And I'm like, why don't we get him an evening carer? And instead of like thinking about it and being like, that's a good idea, she straight away dismissed it, was like, no, it's too hard, no one would want to do that, and got really angry at me for suggesting it. And when I brought that up in the session, like I said I realized that she thinks I'm being selfish. She thinks it's for me, to keep him up later so that he doesn't wake me up. And Dad sort of confirmed that that's the perception. But I actually explained in the session, it doesn't just help me, it also helps my parents, who are clearly not coping as well as they think they are. They think they're coping, but I can see, like, it is difficult to keep him from complaining. He gets really annoying, and some days, like, it's hard to know what's going on in his head because he can't speak properly. Like, he can speak one-syllable moans. And sometimes he doesn't seem to know what he wants. Like, even if you get him to point to things, he doesn't always know what he wants. So he can be really difficult some days. Other days, he'll amuse himself. But, yeah, so, like, I can see my parents kind of struggling with that sometimes. And then also they want to do their own thing, especially, like, when the rugby's on. Then Dad will just watch that and sort of, like, block it out and, try and rush him to bed because he wants to watch the rugby. Who's selfish now? Anyway, yeah, no, I can see my parents, not entirely coping. When my cousin was here, she helped out, entertaining him, and he was like a new person. He loves new people. But so, my parents aren't coping. So not only does it help me in terms of keeping him up later, it helps them because then they don't have to deal with him so much. And then, as I said, he loves new people. Then he's happy because he's getting his attention as well. Like, it helps everyone in the house. And even after I explained that, Dad's response was still to think that I'm being selfish by making this suggestion. And I'm like, I just explained how it's not selfish. I explained how it's good for everyone. And he has the funding. So, like, the only difficulty is finding someone to do the work. And I've actually had conversations behind the scenes. I know a friend who's a carer. It's just that he's not in Sydney at the moment, but maybe when he comes back, he's actually interested in doing this exact shift. So there are people, Mum's wrong, there are people who would be willing to do this type of work. That's the only thing that is like extra work for them, is to find people to fill the shift. That's it. And then once it's done, it helps everyone. But no, I'm still being selfish because I came up with it. Because I came up with it, it's selfish. It's like, yeah. And so other things in the session, I was pretty upset. There was one point where, like, I was talking about how, like, if I come up with a problem, if I express something negative, their instinct is always to try and fix it. Like, with this sleep thing in the car, I talked about the sleep, and then they, you know, decide that I should have a sleeping room, a different bedroom, essentially. Um, so they're trying to fix it, but sometimes, and Dad say that's just how it is. Like, that was so unempathetic, and sometimes what I need is the empathy and just some comforting. I don't always need the problem to be solved. Sometimes I'm just having an emotion, and I guess I need the emotion to be acknowledged and just be like, yeah, comforted. But they sort of snap at me or dismiss me or get kind of like passive aggressive or sarcastic. They do everything but be comforting. They can't even do the Sheldon thing. They're there, Sheldon's here. Super awkward. When I said sometimes I just need the empathy and the comforting, and when the psychologist is like, hearing that, how does that make you feel? Like, cringe. But yeah, Dad's response was just, I think for that one, he just said it makes him feel helpless. I'm like, really? It's too much to ask that? And then the other thing he did in session was just like sort of make excuses. So like when I said that I can talk to my brother or my godmother, he's like, well, they don't live in the house, so they're a little bit removed. It's easier for them. Which, that's true, but that's still an excuse, honestly. I know it's a little bit harder when you're in the situation, but Dad knows that he has problems with his temper, and he's not doing anything about it. There are strategies. For example, like the counting to 10 thing. Before you respond to something that you're angry about, count to 10. Gives you time for your brain to catch up with your emotion, and you can think twice about telling your depressed kid what a burden they are. And he could go to therapy himself if he's really wanting to work on this. Instead of invading my therapy sessions, he could have his own therapy, work on strategies to communicate better, to deal with his emotions better. But he's not doing that. He's turning up at my sessions, making those excuses. And I know the way that he reacts is a coping mechanism, but that's his problem. It shouldn't have to be my problem, but he's making it my problem by not sorting it out. And, with my mum as well, gosh, we did talk about her and how it's so hard for her to confront emotions at all because of her background. And, it would be hard for her to turn on. Like, I think she didn't come to this session. She used my cousin and my aunt as excuses not to be there. But I think that's kind of a cop-out because they were just out shopping for souvenirs. What's important? Like, is your depressed kid important or not? I feel like she ran away from she used that as an excuse. Anyway, so yeah, we talked about that, the reason there, and I thought, I said, I think it's an excuse. Whereas Dad was still trying to give her, no. Anyway, later, Dad, apparently, I think after the session, like, it was so exhausting that I had been asleep. He actually was talking to her about the session and told her it wouldn't be worth her coming or something, which is like, giving her an escape. That's not what we talked about. Like I said, like, she would have to want to come herself. And his response was to reinforce her position instead of, like, that's just not what you do. He shouldn't have said that. He should have just not approached it that way, given her more reason to come. But anyway, so back to the session. Yeah, I don't know. And like, I've made excuses for my parents my whole life, to be honest. Like, I'm always like, both in terms of like not having my needs met and also in terms of explaining the situation to others, I've made a lot of excuses for them. And then, like, when Mum was she expressed to me a feeling of guilt about the glass child situation. I essentially had to play therapist for her, and I realized I shouldn't have done that, and I'm not going to do it again if she brings it up again. Yeah, so my mum needs therapy as well, but in a different way to my dad. And then also culturally, I think because he's like your white Australian boomer, grew up like he was born in the 50s, you know, and then she's Japanese and they've got their own cultural issues. And sometimes when they're communicating with each other, there's a mismatch because they don't understand each other's communication styles. And so they need like some of that therapy as well to communicate better with each other. So there's so much like my family comes across as solid. And like, during anytime like, during COVID, like when we had to get our first lot of vaccines, and we wheeled him in, all the hospital people are like, what a great family. Look at them all coming in together with a disabled kid. They were like really impressed with us, but they don't realize there's actually a lot of bullshit. Um, yeah, the family gives an impression of being together and all this, but there's so much baggage, and it's like I'm the only one who can see it. I mean, I think nowadays, my other brother, he's left now. I think he understands it a bit better, especially because he talks to me and I've expressed all this stuff and he's starting to understand it. Um, he's really matured a lot in the last few years. Um, he's starting to understand it more, but like in terms of people who still live here, I'm the only one making this effort psychologically to sort through the issues, and there's only so much I can do myself. And if my parents aren't willing or just don't even realize, like they're not willing to see that they have an issues that are affecting me, um, and that they would have happier lives too if they dealt with this shit themselves, for themselves, not just for me. But I don't know, that's really difficult. Um, being the only one kind of working on it, and like it puts a lot of roadblocks for my own recovery, and so I have to keep coming back to these schizoid coping mechanisms because it's better not to feel um, in an environment like this, and to not have that child that the schizoid's protecting not have that come out, which again that hinders my progress in recovery as well. So like the more I analyze my situation, I can start seeing possible ways to navigate around the schizoid or possibly even break through the schizoid issues that I have. But because it's caused by the situation that I live in, the roadblocks are all there. So like I can sort of see where I could go if only that roadblock wasn't there. I can almost see it. But there's no point getting any closer to have a look because I can't get through. So yeah, I'm kind of stuck in this situation then. Let me just have another sip. Um, yeah. So that therapy session, I mean, it's hard to recount the whole thing. I just felt really upset. There was a point where I realized it was pointless. It was a mistake. Because I think Dad turned up thinking all he had to do was turn up. That's not how therapy works. You have to be willing to engage and make change and listen, especially like, group therapy. You've got to be able to listen. And I already know what he thinks, but he wasn't. I think like his brain was absorbing the things that I was saying because, then he feels guilt later. I think he did absorb some of the things I was saying, but not a huge level of depth. And in the moment, he was more focused on being defensive. Now, he didn't get angry. And I think that's because the therapist is there. Don't want to have don't want to snap in front of the therapist. But this different way of being defensive showed itself. And it just made me feel a lot worse. I've never come out of therapy feeling that terrible. That's the worst I've ever come out of therapy. I had to go, so like I came in with Dad, we drove in, but then like at the end of the therapy session, first of all, I insisted that my next session be one-on-one again because I need therapy to get through to like process that last session. But then I also said to Dad, like, I'm gonna come home my own way because I need to just like chill out. And so the first thing I did is I went to the bathroom And I did, like, that's when the emotion properly came out, because by the end of that therapy session, I'd become more subdued. I'd realized it was pointless. I was still kind of sniffling, but speaking of sniffling, I just need to, like, sort out my nose. I'm gonna find a box of tissues. Oh, sorry, Hopi, it's just me getting a tissue. You flipped your ear. Oh, here. Let me flip it back. Shimmy. Oh, sweetie, I know. Oh my goodness, poor baby. Oh dear. Sorry. Oh, you know when the dogs flip their ears the wrong way around? He was fast asleep and then he heard this noise. I'm sorry, babe. You're a good boy. Oh, oh my god. Ouch. Okay, all the tea's done. So after the therapy, oh shit, what happened? Focus camera, huh? There we go. Hey, Hopi. Isn't he cute? So yeah. So I said I wasn't gonna go home with Dad. I went to the bathroom and yeah, I was in a really bad state, like crying, but also doing the like silent screaming thing, which is like up there with the worst kind of crying that I can do, the silent screaming. Which I have no control over. And I only do in private. But yeah, I managed to get my shit together. It took me about 5 minutes to compose myself and be able to leave the clinic. And then yeah, I just went and I sat outside for a bit, and then I went and got Macca's. You know, McDonald's is like comfort food, and got myself an extra hash brown, didn't I? And then I came home myself, and then when I got home, like, having emotions is exhausting, so I kind of just flopped into bed. Maybe I walked my dog first and then flopped into my bed, I don't know. And yeah, by then, Dad had gone and told Mum that she wouldn't get anything out of it, which is just not the right thing to say. If you're not encouraging her to come along, you at least shouldn't be encouraging her default avoidance. Don't give her more excuses to avoid her emotions. That's the wrong approach. Yeah, so that was pretty traumatic, and so that was so stressful. Wow, it's taken me like an hour and a half to get to the point. I mean, there's a lot of points, but this particular point is that event, the therapy in particular. Like, I've had a lot of stress up to that point, and then the therapy day. And I tried to be forgiving, right? I tried to do the whole at least he's trying thing, at least he turned up, unlike Mom. But he turned up physically, but not in the sense of like doing the work therapy. Like, he didn't turn up in that way. And then, you know, as the time went on, like, you know, thinking about a sort of processing like everything that happened, it just made me feel more hopeless about my situation, because if that's how they think and if that's how they react, how can I change my situation here? Like, I finally, with the whole metal vocals thing, I finally thought of something that might actually be good for my life, like proper good, instead of just, you know, like, I've been in this holding pattern in my life where I'm treading water, I'm just surviving, but I'm kind of waiting to die, basically. That's what my life is. I've just been in this maintenance pattern, holding pattern, waiting for the fuel to run out, waiting to drown kind of thing. That's what my life has been like. Whereas the metal vocals thing and, you know, trying to get in the studio more, treat my creativity like in a business-like way. Maybe not as a business actually, but treating it as if it were a business. Like, these kinds of things I think would actually be good for me. Instead of just more treading water, they might actually be good for me. But I can't even talk to my parents about it because I expect them to react in this way, to think that I'm just being selfish. And like, I probably should be more selfish because I've spent so much of my life minimizing my needs so that they could look after my little brother, and then learning, like, it's had these knock-on implications for other parts of my life. Because, for example, with Rainbow Death Ray, I wrote most of the music, but I gave everyone a roughly equal share in the royalties, even though most of the band members had nothing to do with the writing. I should have taken all the royalties for myself, but because I'm always like I have this habit of being too nice, being too selfless, I gave my part of my royalties away. Things like that. Like, it has knock on. And so now I actually do feel resentful about that, because, like, I could still be performing Rainbow Death Ray material, but I don't want to because people who don't deserve it get the money from it. Like, I do have that resentful thought. It's maybe not a great thought, but that's what happens from being too selfless. I probably should think about myself more, because look what happened. I'm depressed. I have no life. I probably do need to do more for myself. But they're telling me I'm not allowed to. And I'm not allowed to have feelings. I'm not allowed to feel sad. I'm not allowed to feel tired. I'm not allowed to express these feelings, kinds of things. It just gives me this really feeling of hopelessness, because I have this idea about maybe this would actually help my life this time. Like, it's not like starting a new uni course and hoping uni will fix me. This is like actually realizing that creativity is important to me somehow. Coming up with things that I can try to do. And, there was a sense of hope there, but then realizing I need my parents on board, but I don't think they will be on board. And so there's that feeling of hopelessness that came out of this therapy session. And so, yeah, the following day, I was really thinking about it and being depressed. And by that night, I was starting to show symptoms of COVID. And so, as I said, way back at the start of this stream, I think I had been carrying COVID for a little while before that. But once I became that level of stressed, my immune, like, the cortisol and those kinds of hormones that kick in, reduced my immune system's ability to fight back against the COVID. All the vaccines and so on, you need your immune system. It doesn't matter how many vaccines you have if you have no immune system to begin with. So the stress lowered my immune system, let the COVID take over, also re-triggered my nuclear mouth ulcers, because my mouth ulcers in general seem to be stress related, but you throw in the immune system and the COVID and it triggered that. Thankfully, it only stayed in one side of my mouth and didn't get as bad as it has in the past, and so I didn't need to go and get steroids. But yeah, I think actually the stress did that to me, contributed in a big way. And, maybe I was always going to get sick with COVID, but, like, I think I've had COVID before and I didn't even get bad enough. Like, I'd had to sleep for a day or two. That was it. But this has been a whole week and I've still got symptoms. And I think the reason it's been so strong is because stress weakened my immune system. So now my mental health is affecting my physical health. And my parents, who love and care for me and give me, like, the survival basics, they could kill me a different way if I catch diseases because I'm too stressed from dealing with all this shit. And, like, in the past, it wasn't so bad because I was able to block it out. Had all the schizoid defense mechanisms, didn't really have an awareness of why I'm like this. Whereas now I understand these issues better, and it's sort of, it's kind of weird because, my brain, I can compartmentalize different parts of my brain. And so the part of me, the more child part, I think that has come out of me more. And so I'm feeling things that I haven't felt in a long time and trying to deal with that. And I don't have the defensive denial to be able to protect it. I just have bits and pieces of other things. Like, the denial was keeping everything together. I've lost the denial, and now the pieces of my defense have been weakened. And so, yeah, like, my mental health has actually gotten worse since I figured out why I'm like this. I guess because there's nothing I can do about it. I'm so fucked up at this point that I can't move out. Like, I probably should move out, but the economy is shit, especially at the moment. And I'm so screwed up that it's just not possible unless I win the fucking lotto, and, good luck to that. Yeah, so I think, like, the therapy session was re-traumatizing I think I'm using that word right, because it sort of brought up all this shit that I've had to live with for so long. And like, they don't, I mean, Dad was even acting surprised when I mentioned childhood trauma. We've talked about the glass child thing. He knows that that's a thing for me. But he was still acting like surprised when I brought it up in therapy. And it's just like, do you keep forgetting everything that I've been through? Everything that I put up with, that as a child I had to deal with, that screwed me up in adulthood, things that I still deal with because he still comes first. And, even small things like, we have a rice cooker, Japanese rice cooker, because Aussie ones are shit. And, you turn it off, and then Mum will make 2 plates to go in the fridge, and then the rest goes into like little plastic things, Glad wrapped into the freezer. The ones in the fridge, like, I just understand them to be for my little brother, and so I always get the shitty ones in the freezer and reheat them in the microwave, even though the plastic's probably gonna kill me. Like, just even small things like that, like, so much stuff, I just automatically lower my needs because I just assume everyone else's needs are more than mine. Yeah, so that's, I think, why, like, part of how I ended up as sick as I have been. Now I know it's possible that I just got a bad strain of COVID because things are still going around, and I'm one of the few people who wears a mask anywhere. Sad thing about masks is it's better at stopping you from spreading things. It's not as good at stopping other people giving it to you. And then also, even though I don't leave very much, the rest of the family goes out and they can bring diseases back, and I don't wear a mask at home because that would be a bit excessive. So I could have caught it from them even though I've been careful. So that's another way that they could kill me. Yeah, no, the stress was shit. And I think it all comes back to these things. And it's, yeah, affecting my physical health now. And it makes me wonder, like, maybe I should. I need to keep my eyes open, because if there is an opportunity to move out into a situation that isn't worse than here, like, I could move out into some shitty studio apartment in some horrible location, but that would actually be worse than living here. So, because like, I have no life skills. I can cook a few things, but like, like, my parents have their own laundry schedule, so I haven't even really learned to wash my own clothes. Like, I'm sure I could figure it out, just follow the instructions, look it up on the internet, but I don't have that as like a thing that I just naturally know. There's like all these little things. Because like, my disabled brother, he goes through so many clothes because he's gross. He is gross. It's a fact. And he chews his shirts to bits and all this kind of stuff, and wipes his nose on everything, and like, he's gross. Yeah, so, and then, nappies and things, so there's a lot of washing, and so, I kind of just wear I just wear trackies and then just change my shirt and my undies every day. Like, I don't have a lot of washing, so I never really need to put on a load myself. It just goes in with everything else. And then I have so many shirts because I keep buying too many shirts. You'll figure out what you need to learn as you run into problems you don't know how to fix. Yeah. I guess, though, with moving out, one of the problems is then my life becomes about survival, and I already don't want to be in this existence. So if I have to start thinking about survival, it's like, what's the point? Why even be here? And then I start going into that spiral again. So yeah, that's why I need to win the lottery. Because then it won't be about survival. It'll be like, look at all this money I have. Let's throw that at that problem. God, I'm so screwed up. Yeah, but so, as I mentioned to Patreon, I was sort of thinking about it, and I've also done a lot of reading about emotionally unavailable parents while I've been sick. Because, like, I've been I mean, I've slept a lot, but I've also sort of just laid down a lot and had nothing to do. So I just sort of Googled on my phone, or when I've been sitting here, just Googled stuff and read a lot about emotionally unavailable parents. And one of the things that they all seem to say is like, you have to accept that you can't change them. And also you have to let go of they call it so something fantasy. The idea behind, I can't remember if it had a specific name, but the idea behind it is the fantasy that your parents will change and you will be able to tell them all the stuff that you need to tell them and you will be able to get the love, blah, 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 blah. You have to let go of that. And that's difficult, but I realized, like, because, there is so much stuff that I I feel like I need to let out. Um, but then, I was lying down this afternoon, and I was just thinking about it, and I was like, well, I can't talk to them about it. But what I can do is I can make art about it. And so I've started that. I got into my studio, did a diary entry. I've got this like art journal. Um, and I was using it every week at the studio. And so I think I need to do that now. I need to use it every week at home at least. But because I'm at home, now it doesn't have to be every week. Like I could only manage going to the studio once a week while I had that. But now that it's at home, it's just down the hallway. It's not that hard. So I could do it every day. I probably won't, but I could. And so like today's entry, I put in a whole bunch of, your dad sounds like the typical white boomer dad. I got diagnosed with mild autism. It was masked super well during most of my life before a burnout, and my dad is still in denial. Yeah, he is that sort of boomer born in the 50s, also from a conservative background, Catholic. He went to the private schools that a lot of the politicians went to, the Sydney politicians. Yeah, so he is that type, and I realize that's part of his problem is, they didn't have the education on mental health, a bit like, mum with her Japanese stuff. Like, I realize all that, but we're now living in 2023, and there is more awareness, and I mean, it took them until about 2016 to even accept that my mental illness is actually a thing. It's not just me being lazy, it's actually a thing that I struggle with. And I'm not trying to be this way. It's just something that, my brain, I don't have control over it. It took them until 2016 to even start properly accepting that. But that's been a while now. And they could, if they really love and care about me and want me to be happy, they could go and educate themselves more. They could go and do therapy. They have options. Yes, they came from this background, but that's an excuse. They can take steps to change. They won't be perfect, but they could at least take those steps instead of expecting me. Like, I think when Dad came to therapy, he was expecting the therapist to tell me that I was doing wrong. Like, he was going to have his position validated. I think that's what he was kind of expecting, and that somehow him being there would, yeah. Anyway, no, so I wrote about some of my frustrations in this diary, this art diary, and in my sort of artistic way, because I don't want it to be too, like, if you just write something, it's too straightforward. One of the things I like about art, and also my shitty poetry, I should finish my poetry book. And like, I should do a re-release of my poetry as well, because it's been so long. But one of the things I like about art, text-based art, and poetry is you can say a lot of stuff, but you can say it in an artistic way. So it's not fully straightforward. There's a bit that's open to interpretation. And so if I need to say something really confronting, but I don't feel like I can use imagery to get around it. I can be ambiguous. So people could say, is it about this? And I could be like, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Yeah, so I did this sort of artistic way of doing it tonight. That's on Patreon now for my cult members. But yeah, no, I think what I need to do is more of that. And I wrote this in the Patreon, like I wrote an entry underneath this artwork as well. And, like my parents don't really know me, like how I am on the inside more kind of like me. But you know, people on the internet care more about actual me than my parents. Like my parents don't even know actual me. Um, and yeah, like there's something like if that child in me covered by the schizoid, if the child in me is wanting some kind of validation, um, doing art and sending it out into the internet is probably the best I can do for that child part of me, if that makes some kind of a sense. Um, Sometimes it's hard for me to think that way because, you know, the internet, people on the internet, who gives a shit about people on the internet? Like, I won't meet most of you. There's a lot of trolls out there. There's a lot of people who don't really have a brain. Like, you know, even my disabled brother, intellectually disabled brother, he can scroll on YouTube and he can occasionally accidentally leave gibberish comments. um, but I can see, like, you know, we're a tribal species, so there must be that part of me that does want the social connection. So like it's kind of this is me compartmentalizing things again. It's like, okay, maybe like I think if I didn't have the schizoid issues, it would be more instinctive for me to be like, okay, my parents aren't giving me what I need, but people on the internet and people like, you know, if I go out into the world and do music and meet people in real life, that would also help as well. You know, what's that thing they say? Is that friends are the family you choose? If I didn't have schizoid, I think that would be more instinctive for me to go and pursue that. I think because I have schizoid, I have to do a bit more of that compartmentalization going. And, you know, like it's harder for me to realize maybe that's what I need to do. And I think, um, you know, because of the difficulty of having a disabled brother and being a glass child, um, I think there's a lot that I've had to keep inside myself my whole life, and not express. And, you know, the first time I heard the phrase bottle your feelings, I actually got myself an actual little bottle and started putting my feelings, like writing them on a piece of paper, putting them in there and not expressing them. I know that's the opposite. Like they were saying, don't bottle your feelings. And I'm like, bottle my feelings. That sounds like an excellent idea. Child me is so fucking weird. I'm so fucking weird. Did I tell you about how I crossed the street? Never mind how child me crossed the street. No, I think there's a lot that I suppressed, and I had that instinct to keep suppressing it because, you know, if I expressed a need, um, you know, it'd be belittled. And I grew up in an extreme Christian family, and they simply didn't believe in mental disorders. Left my family in church 20 years old and got diagnosed with schizoid and CPTSD a couple years later. Yeah. No, I don't know about extreme Christianity, but in Catholicism, I think I didn't realize this for a long time, but I think Catholicism has a reputation for being like, oh, I'm such a sinner, and having this whole guilt complex. How Charmander crosses the street. Hang on, I'll get to that. No, Catholicism, like when I went to my first reconciliation, which I think is like confession, I didn't have anything to confess. I was such a young kid. I didn't think I'd done anything wrong. So I made up some crap about starting fights. So I lied to the priest. That's probably what I should have confessed is, by the way, I just lied to you. That's what I'm confessing. Anyway, just this assumption that you had done something wrong. Join a band or something. It's my fave. Yeah, I mean, like I've been in bands before. I just can't find the right band to take me in. And that would, if I talk about that, we'll be ranting for another hour, and it's already past midnight here. But no, how a child me crossed the street because I was short, right? And I was worried that the cars couldn't see me. So to make myself taller, I'd put my hand up like this instead of walk across the street like. Da, 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 da. And can you imagine these people in their cars watching their kid do a giraffe? I thought it was perfectly normal, perfectly sensible at the time. I had a good reasoning for it. But yeah, I realized it was a little bit weird. Yeah, child me was a bit strange. What was I talking about before I went on those rambles? Before Loz Tax comment, what was I talking about? Cute. child me doing weird things. Oh shit, can you remind me, what was I talking about? Let me have a drink while I'm thinking about it. Oh, bottling my feelings. Oh yeah, I remember now. Parents not giving attention to diagnosis, the bans, and education. No, no, no. The thing that I was on was about the bottling my feelings, being a weirdo like that. But so I think there's a lot that I just didn't express because, yeah, I would be. There was one thing that my parents did is like, if I had a good time, I wasn't allowed to show any negative emotions after. So, like, if I went to a party or if I stayed at a friend's place, it was assumed that I had a good time. And so, if I showed any negativity afterwards, I would get in trouble for that. Um, and also, often, like, if I was in a negative mood, they'd say I had attitude. I didn't even know what attitude was. Um, so, like having my emotions um, just sort of have a music project I've been looking for a vocalist for. So I've been stalking my YouTube for a bit. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm mainly looking for a live band. I might be open for like the occasional guest spot in the future, but yeah, live bands are my priority. And I'm not interested in doing like an online only project. I've done that and it was disappointing that it never became live. And it's just too painful. It's too painful for me to put my like creative soul into it and have this music baby, but then I can't gig with it. It's actually painful for me to do that. Um, yeah, I need to be on stage. I need to have that adrenaline and that feeling of like, here's my creativity out in the world. Go live. Oh, are you in Sydney? Because yeah, I'm in Sydney. That the geography is a thing. But anyway, so like emotions. Yeah, I was sort of not allowed to have negative emotions. Oh, you are? That's great. Well, that's potentially doable. So yeah, um, you can stalk some of my other social media. It's hard to talk on YouTube about this stuff. So like, I don't know, send me an email or hit me up on Facebook, Instagram. Just like make sure I know who you are. Hey, I'm ZZZ on YouTube. Yeah, but obviously I need to get well again and then make sure my voice sounds okay. It's weird though, like when you're sick, when you've damaged your voice, actually, I don't know if this is a sickness thing. When you've damaged your voice, they say that your high notes go first. But I tend to find that my chest voice goes. The high notes were not so bad. I'm trying not to be loud. We'll chat on Facebook. Oh, okay. Be in contact with you soon once we've recorded the rest of the songs. Okay, cool. Yeah, just next time we chat, maybe mention your ZZZ. Okay, but so back to feelings. Not allowed to have negative feelings, especially if I've had or been perceived to have a good time. Because sometimes, I don't know, I didn't always connect with the friends that I had. Anyway, so not allowed to express my emotions, not allowed to express that kind of negativity, having to keep it all to myself. I think that might be part of the reason that I have a creative impulse, because I need to express this stuff somehow. I can't express it safely at home with my parents and my family. So it has to come out some way. And maybe that's why I YouTube as well, because I can't talk to my family, can't talk to my parents, talk to YouTube instead. And like, I'm so confident now that they're not going to look at my YouTube that I can just say all this shit. Oh wow, Stream Elements bot is still working, even though it's not OBS. Oh, shilling my merch. Oh my goodness. Trouble is when I laugh at the moment I cough. That's another problem for singing though. If I keep coughing when I do too much with my voice. Anyway, yeah, so I sort of think, I mean, if I can't talk to my parents, I should be creative. But maybe that's why I'm creative in the first place. Maybe my brain was like, I gotta find a way to let it out. Yeah. That could be it. Is this is this what psychoanalysis is? Is this what Freud was into? Like, I used to think that the childhood stuff was not such an issue. And so, like, watching something like Dexter, and he's had his childhood trauma kind of thing, and they say that's why he kills. And I'm like, that's not realistic. Like, come on. Okay, you've seen your mum being chopped up. You're not going to go and then do that. But now, seeing in myself how much, even just the emotional trauma, emotional neglect kind of stuff, or like, these small things that seemed okay at the time, and now I realize were actually really not good for me. Did it just do another ad? I wasn't paying attention. I'm sorry. I wish it would just show something in the middle so that I could see when an ad's. Anyway, no. Now that I've been through, like, understand my own childhood issues, Dexter seems a little bit less unbelievable. Like, it actually seems a bit more legit that someone can go through something terrible in childhood and it can fuck them up that badly. I can actually understand that better now. Yeah, I didn't. And I think also part of it might have been my own denial. Like, knowing that I had all these mental illnesses, like, this level of mental illness, I probably didn't want to admit that it had anything to do with my family, that it had anything to do with my childhood. I think I was in denial for a long time, and I think that's part of the defense mechanism. But I don't know. Now that I've figured it out, I really think getting the schizoid diagnosis is what helped it click for me. So, and yeah, I don't know, maybe that's helped me accept it. Also, I'm super old now, so I'm probably past the main denial phase. Maybe a bit more capable of accepting this shit about myself. Yeah. I had another thought, and it sort of escaped me. Oh no, the childhood issues, man. Oh, the other thought. So the other thing that I was thinking of, okay, so this whole, there's that psychologist who thinks I have DID, which I don't. There's no way. You would have to do a lot of weaseling to get me into that category, right? But I do have this sort of separation of, beyond the compartmentalizing and the derealization sometimes and depersonalization sometimes, I did actually start depersonalizing before going into that therapy session because I was just like getting to that level of anxiety. But no, I'm talking more about the actual like split in my sense of self, where I have like, this channel is called Destroyer Mariko because that's like the two pieces of me. I think for a long time, like, in the past while I've been thinking about it, and I thought maybe that's a reaction to the Catholic thing. Because, you have to be the good little Catholic schoolgirl. But that's not everything I was. And so everything that didn't fit the good Catholic schoolgirl thing probably went into that darker part of me. But I'm now wondering if, in order to justify how my parents treated me, maybe that also formed in my mind to sort of like help me accept the way that I was being treated, like I'm not good enough because I have this darker part of me. I've sort of started to wonder if that is a factor in that developing in my mind. So there's the Catholic shit, but also, why don't my parents love me enough kind of thing. I've started wondering if that's part of that. Interestingly, that hasn't been as much of an issue for me lately. Maybe it's because I haven't been watching as much fiction, though, because it does get set off by fiction, and I can see, like, Fight Club in the background there. But, no, there is a lot of stuff that I couldn't express as well that sort of went to that compartmentalized part of me that sort of ended up taking on a life of its own in some kind of a weird way. But I don't know, sometimes, like, it does just stop being an issue for a while, and I think, "Oh, I've finally grown out of that thing," that sort of imaginary friend type stuff, like, imaginary split personality type stuff, but then it'll come back and, be quite a shock, so maybe I'm dismissing it too early, but I just sort of started wondering if, like, maybe that's the reason, maybe that's, well, one of the reasons that my brain did that, to sort of justify, like, yeah, why my parents, why I was not good enough despite, getting good grades, being well behaved, never doing drugs and alcohol and all the other things the kids were getting up to. I was a really well behaved kid. Um, so why am I not good enough? Dark stuff. Why doesn't God love me maybe as well? Oh dear. Anyway, so shit, it's 12:30. Well, I've survived better than I was expecting to. And so that's my sort of I'm still alive update. Some depressing stuff, I guess, but I think I really needed to get that off my chest because for the past week being in bed, a lot of this stuff has gone around in my mind. And often things will go around in my mind until I'm able to express them. I need to get stuff out of my head, otherwise it keeps going. And now, hopefully, that helps. And then also with me thinking, Patreon and also just my creative life, thinking that's where I need to put the effort. That's where I need to, yay, alive. But the creative stuff is where I need to put all these frustrations because my parents aren't going to change. They need to decide for themselves that they need to change, and I don't see that happening. They're too set in their ways. It's too much effort. It's easier to just float in life. So I need to put all my frustrations into my art and just try and adapt to the situation at home. Not having the denial anymore makes it harder, and I think it's sort of broken down some of the schizoid things a bit. But some of those strategies of schizoid, and just other things that I've learned about people, and I can keep learning about how to manage conflict management kinds of stuff. I can keep trying and just try and manage the situation at home. I think Dad has been feeling guilty because when I came home from, like, after therapy, he came home first. I went and stuffed around before I was ready to come home. And he did, I didn't want to engage, but he did try to check on me. And then I think because I've been sick, I mean, it's a lot easier for my parents to accept physical illness. So they've mostly left me alone. But Dad, oh my God, I was trying to self-isolate because, like, they're in their 60s. And they've got their own health problems. Like, they're much more at risk of serious COVID complications than I am. And here's me being selfish again, is I'm thinking about their health. And so, like, I've been wearing masks when I was going in the common areas and mostly keeping to myself in here. And Dad would keep coming in my room and hovering by the door and asking if I need anything and, like, tried to take one of my plates. And I'm, like, coming right into my room. I'm like, this is a room of disease. But I think it's probably because he felt guilty. I don't know if he's connected the dots between my stress triggering the worst COVID that I've had all pandemic. I don't know if he's connected the dots. Or maybe it's like, one of the things, I think when we had arguments when I was really young, and kids will say things like, I hate you kind of stuff. And so I think either me or my brother would have said that. Not the disabled brother, the other one. One of us would have said something like that. And Dad was like, what if I go out into the front yard and get hit by lightning and that's the last thing you ever said to me? Which to me, you're dead, so what? But I understand, like, normal people place a lot of importance on last words. So, I think that's what he was getting at. But I think maybe if that's how he thinks, if he finds last words important, then perhaps he was a bit worried that if I got severely ill, like, I could die from COVID. You don't know. I'm not fit. I can sing, so my lungs are probably in better condition than some people's. But, like, there's always a chance. Young people have died from COVID. I could have some undiagnosed condition that no one knows about. So maybe he was a bit worried like that because I haven't been that sick in a very long time. And so he's constantly checking on me and trying to be nice because what if I died? I don't know. And, like, the last interaction we had was this really distressing therapy session. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know what dots have clicked in his mind, but I think he does feel some level of guilt. And I mean, he always sort of does that where he'll lash out and then feel guilt and then repeat the pattern. But because I tried. I That therapy session, it was so hard, but I did say a lot of the stuff. It's still only a fraction, but I did say a lot of stuff that he hasn't heard before. I really made an effort, especially once, like, I was really nervous at the beginning, and the therapist is like, "Is it because you don't feel safe talking?" And I was like, "Yeah." But there was a point where, because Dad was talking his shit, and I'm like, if I don't say something, this is going to be for nothing. So I really made an effort to just say a bunch of stuff, be like, here are the things. Yeah. Anyway, I made this huge effort, but it was really distressing. Um, and I think if he absorbed some of the stuff that I did say, that's the point I'm trying to make, is if he, like, so yeah, he feels some guilt. He could keep repeating his pattern, but if he did absorb some of the things that I had to say, maybe something will change. Because I also talked about not wanting to be here, not wanting to exist, and waiting to die and stuff like that. If that's stuck in his head, maybe he'll realize how serious my mental illness is. Because I'm very good at seeming better than I am. I haven't cried all live streams, so just coughed my lungs a bit. I'm good at hiding what's really going on. I cry in private, and I do the silent screaming thing, and no one knows how bad it gets sometimes. But I have sort of revealed, like, this is stuff that goes through my head. This is how bad it gets. I was crying in the session too. Using a lot of tissues. Oh my god, the number of tissues I've used in the past week. I emptied my bin now, but it was fucking disgusting. Yeah, anyway, I don't know. There's a chance that something might change there, but I'm not holding my breath, so I need to focus on the things that I can do myself. And I'm not sure. I need to talk to my therapist, so I'm hoping I'll be well enough to go to therapy this week. But like, there was conversation about him coming to therapy sessions later, and I don't think I want him to. I think until I'm confident that he knows he has to do the work, I don't want him coming to my therapy sessions. I can't have therapy sessions end that stressfully to the point that I'm silent screaming in the bathroom. I can't have that. I need therapy sessions to be supportive, and I can't have him invading it, especially when there's another 2-week gap before I can have my next session. I've got to talk to my therapist about it, but I'm thinking it was a bad idea, because now it's sort of solidified in my head that my parents just don't fucking get it. But I guess sort of understanding that, now I know for sure. Yeah, it's difficult stuff. Anyway, so I'm still alive. I'm still hanging in here. I don't want to be alive, but I'm still here. COVID, yeah, like, I still have that discomfort when I'm breathing a bit, and I've still got the mouth ulcers, but they are healing. Some of them have already healed, so that means the others will go in another couple days. And then I've just got to get this, the lungs working again. Vocal cords, almost there. False cords, I think, are going to take a little bit longer, because they're the ones that are involved in, shifting all the gunk. So they've been a bit strained doing that. So growling. Can I fry scream? Wow! Hey! No, that's still too difficult. So I can't even cover that way. I've got a lot of work to do. Yeah, all right. So that's my ramble. Let's see, 12:40. I can stick around for a bit if anyone wants to chuck some questions at me. Like, how long is a piece of string? I don't know, but you shouldn't build a submarine out of him. Oh, I have wanted to go on rants about current events, but it's too much fun being an audience member. That the whole Titan submarine. Okay, one thing that annoys me about the Titan submarine thing, particularly about the commentary, is when all these YouTube channels, they'll show the Titan sub, or they think they're showing the Titan sub. A lot of the footage that they're cutting in is actually the Cyclops 1. It's not the Titan. You can tell because it has a bigger portal. The Titan sub has like a small portal surrounded by the titanium. The Cyclops front is just a big window. And then also the Cyclops has a top window as well. And yeah, a lot of these channels that act like they know what they're talking about show the wrong sub, the wrong submersible. And no one points it out. And I'm sitting here going, guys, have you noticed that you're doing this wrong? Like, yes, the guy's an idiot, but you're showing the wrong submarine. Submersible. Oh, dear. Everything else, though, and then the other thing is people talking about, James Cameron said they dropped their weights. I want to know where he got that information from, because he's the only one, he seems to be the source of that rumor. And I'm pretty sure the interview I saw, he said he can't confirm this, but he understands that they had dropped their weights and were trying to surface. But he doesn't say how he got that information, and he says he's not sure. But now everyone's reporting it as if they did drop their weights and they were trying to come to the surface. I want to know if that's been confirmed by some other source. Otherwise, I think it's way too early to talk about that kind of stuff. And also, it doesn't square with the surface boat. They waited, was it 8 to 10 hours before they reported it missing? Whereas if they knew it was trying to surface, they would give it maybe like 3 or 4 hours before reporting a problem, and they didn't. Because that's how long it should have taken out. Like, maybe it was coming up slowly, but you'd think, hey, there's actually a problem. Maybe we should send a rescue team earlier. So either the ship up top didn't know that they were dropping their weights, and that's the only way that I feel like James Cameron could have gotten the information, is if the surface boat, someone there was feeding him the information. Either they didn't know, or they were even more incompetent. But I think a lot of the engineers were genuinely trying to do safety and so on. So, it's hard for me to think that the incompetence thing explains why it took them so long to report it. So, those are some thoughts that I've been wanting to put in comments, but then realized I don't want to have this discussion with internet armchair experts. Otherwise, the main information that's come out, and all the memes, some good memes going around. No one's got any questions. My, But yeah, music, I gotta get back into that, but that's limited by my health. So they had to ask JC why the sub wasn't coming up, even though they dropped the weights. No, I think because the deep sea submersible community, it sounds like they're actually, because there's not many of them, it sounds like they're actually kind of tight. Because there's only a handful of them. There's only like, what did they say, 10 submersibles that can go to the 400 meters. And the Titan was the only one that wasn't certified. But so there's only 10 submersibles. That's a small community. Like, I know there'd be multiple engineers working on each one, but still a small community as far as those things go. So they all talk to each other. And so I imagine he knows someone on the ship and they might have told him certain things. I didn't even know about the submersible thing before you mentioned it a while back. Oh, man. Yeah, it's been everywhere. But I guess because, my parents are chronic news watchers. They watch every channel except SBS News of the free-to-air stuff. And then I actually, look at news on my phone when I'm bored. And I get bored a lot. And then I'm on the internet a lot. So I guess, yeah. got on my radar pretty quickly. But it's just the whole thing is such a joke. Like the more like I think what usually I wouldn't give a shit about these kinds of events. And I think most people are like that. But what made this one so captivating, I think, is that the more you heard about it, the more ridiculous things got. Hey, that's probably a good way to be, because honestly, the outside world. I think I started paying attention in 2016 because that's when I was badly depressed. I'd finally gotten to a point where I couldn't work anymore at that point. That's the first time I'd stopped being able to work since my first job. Um, yeah, and so I had a lot of time to myself, and I was having trouble with, usually I would spend a lot more time on fantasy fiction, watching movies and so on. But I got to a point where that was making the contrast worse. Like the contrast between fantasy and reality was getting so, like, I was so unhappy with reality that, yeah, the fiction and all that, that would entertain me for a while, but I'd still have to come back to the real world, and I was just feeling worse and worse. So I started watching more real world stuff. That's also when Trump was doing his first run, and it's just like, America is so weird. Like watching that, like, train wreck in motion. And then stumbling onto those late night hosts, and they were making Trump jokes, and sort of getting into a bit of that, and sort of like, because I didn't know a huge amount about America, and then I'm like, oh, okay. So I think around 2016 is when I started paying attention to more world stuff and watching more news, like domestic news as well, not just American. Yeah. And then it's like, the world still sucks, but at least I'm not raising my expectations with fantasy fiction type stuff. But in the end, it's not that interesting a lot of the time, or I don't know, like the start of the Ukraine war was interesting, but things sort of like get a bit like there's nothing I can do about anything. I learn about all these world events and local events and whatever else is on the news, and some things piss me off, and maybe some things are interesting and whatever, but I can't do anything about any of it. So if things in the world are depressing, like maybe it's better to just not know, because all it's going to do is make me more frustrated. And then also because I'm so removed from society, because I'm so broken, a lot of stuff doesn't apply to me. Like, the current state of the economy, the main way that affects me is that I can't move out. I've realized I probably need to move out, but I can't because I can't afford it. Otherwise, I don't really spend money on anything because I'm living with my parents, and yeah, like I pay for private health insurance, and I pay for my psychology sessions. Dad's tried to pay for it, but I've made it really hard for him to take over because I don't want him to. I don't want him to feel like he's helped in that kind of token way. So those are the two main expenses I have, and then the rest, I don't know, like occasionally if I go somewhere and have some McDonald's, um, that's what I spend my money on. So the state of the economy doesn't really have that much effect on me because I'm just not part of the world. So even that kind of stuff, does it help me to know? Maybe it prepares me for things if I ever do get out there, but for the most part, I don't know, it's just like learning more things to frustrate me, basically. 'Cause there's so much in the world that is frustrating. Maybe makes me feel more inclined to be a hermit. I don't know. Oh man. Yeah, that's just God, there's so fucking much. Wow. Yeah, so this is your last chance to ask a question, raise a comment. Otherwise, yeah, I'm alive. I'm getting better. I'm trying to focus more on remembering to do art. It's very easy for me to forget these sorts of things that I should be doing that are healthier for me to do. I don't know if that's depression making it hard for me to focus on those things, or, maybe the childhood trauma behind the schizoid stuff, maybe that child thing is distracting me as well, because it wants its needs looked after, and so it keeps trying to push out of the way and be like, I'm a tortured child, I need my needs met, but it's not going to get its needs met. So it's not helpful for it to keep pushing. I need to push back and be like, no, now is not the time to deal with these childhood issues. You can't, there's no fix for it. So maybe that's been distracting. Also, like, having had 4.5 months not being able to use my studio with my cousin in there, now I've got to try and get back into, now I can be creative, whereas for months I haven't been able to. So I guess maybe that's sent me more into the introspective child stuff, because I couldn't do anything else, whereas now I have the option to be creative again. So I need to, like, tweak my mind to think about that again. Get back into that mode, that more helpful mode of being. Yeah, maybe that's part of the problem. I wonder if that also explains why I wanted to go to the family shindig. The tortured child was hoping to talk to family, but that's when I tested positive for COVID, so I couldn't go to the family shindig. And yeah, usually, like, in the past, I haven't always wanted to go to family stuff. But yeah, I think because of that sort of tortured child was hoping to connect with people who are easier to connect with. Like, my brother was going to be there, my godmother's going to be there. My brother's girlfriend seems to like me and is reasonably easy to talk to, so her as well, and then other family members who aren't like my parents. Some of them are, some of them are not. Yeah, I think maybe that's probably why I wanted to go, because the tortured child was looking for some kind of connection. And that was like the day after my cousin and my aunt went home. That's kind of an interesting thought. Sort of, that's a new compartmentalization of my brain, is like, with understanding the trauma and getting rid of the denial, I have now this sort of child thing to deal with to try and distract me and throw me off course. Shit, it's so hard dealing with all the pieces of my mind in that way. Interesting. Anyway, let's see, I've been going for 2.5 hours. God, that's longer than I meant to. Well, if no one has anything else to say, stuff and things, insert generic YouTuber speech. Yeah, I don't know. If anyone has some superstitious nonsense you do, can you please do it so that I'll win either? There's the lottery on Tuesday. I think that's 10 million. And then on Thursday is Powerball, 12 million. If you could do your magic and help me win that. Yeah, I think that's my best bet in life. Hope of the hopeless, but I am the hopeless, so there you go. Alright. I think there's not too much lag because I'm in webcam mode, so I'm gonna go. Yeah, I'll try and get back into more of the YouTube stuff, but it depends a bit on how I'm feeling. And everyone's routines are screwed up. Mum and Dad go to the gym, but I don't know when they're going to go, and Dad doesn't seem to have been going lately, so maybe I can only do things at night. Playing the lottery here. Yeah, I think that would help a lot of us, hey? But yeah, so I don't know when I have the place to myself, so I'm probably have to do more night stuff. I don't know. Anyway, stuff and things. I'll catch you whenever I catch you, and hopefully I'll be healthier, and I'll try and do more music stuff, and I'll try and remember to do art stuff, join my cult, blah, blah, blah. I'll see you later. Oh, hang on. Now I'll see you later.